The forest was quiet, too quiet. The wealthy man, known for his sharp mind and sterile lifestyle, walked slowly along the dirt path. His expensive shoes crunched against the dry leaves, and his tailored coat clung to his broad shoulders. He had come here to escape the noise of the city, to find some peace in the solitude of nature. But peace was the last thing he found. A faint sound broke the silence, a cry, soft and trembling, like the whimper of a wounded animal. He stopped, his ears straining to locate the source. The sound came again, this time clearer. It was not an animal. It was a child. He followed the sound, his heart pounding despite his usual calm demeanor. The trees grew thicker, their branches intertwining to block the sunlight. The air felt colder, heavier, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. And then he saw her. A little girl, no older than 6 or 7, sat on the ground, her tiny frame shaking with sobs. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her hair matted with leaves and twigs. But what caught his attention were her eyes. They glowed faintly, like 2 tiny stars in the darkness of the forest. For a moment, he hesitated. He was a man of logic, of reason. He didn't believe in fairy tales or miracles. But something about the girl pulled at him, something he couldn't explain. He knelt beside her, his voice soft but firm. "What are you doing here, child? Where are your parents?" The girl looked up at him, her glowing eyes filled with tears. She didn't speak, didn't even nod. She just stared at him, as if trying to decide whether he was friend or foe. The man sighed, his practical side warring with the strange compassion he felt. He couldn't leave her here, not in the middle of the forest, not like this. He removed his coat and wrapped it around her tiny shoulders, lifting her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her body trembling against his chest. "It's all right," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "I'll take you somewhere safe." As he carried her out of the forest, the girl's glowing eyes never left his face. She didn't cry anymore, but her silence was unnerving. Who was she? Where did she come from? And why was she alone in the forest? When they reached his mansion, the staff stared in shock as their usually reserved employer walked in with a dirty, glowing-eyed child in his arms. He ignored their questions, carrying the girl straight to the guest room. He ordered warm water, clean clothes, and food, his mind racing with unanswered questions. The girl allowed him to clean her up, her movements slow and deliberate. She ate the food he offered, her glowing eyes never leaving his face. When he finally tucked her into bed, she reached out and grabbed his hand. Her touch was warm, almost electric, and for a moment, he felt a strange connection, as if she was trying to tell him something without words. Then she whispered something, her voice soft and melodic, but in a language he didn't understand. The next morning, the man woke up early, his mind still racing from the events of the previous night. He couldn't shake the image of the girl's glowing eyes or the strange words she had whispered. He dressed quickly and made his way to the guest room, half expecting her to be gone. But she was still there, sitting on the edge of the bed, her glowing eyes fixed on the window. "Good morning," he said, his voice gentle. "Did you sleep well?" The girl didn't respond. She didn't even look at him. Her gaze remained fixed on the sunlight streaming through the window, as if she had never seen it before. The man frowned, his concern growing. He knelt in front of her, trying to catch her eye. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked. "Or where you come from?" Again, there was no response. The girl simply pointed at the window, her small hand glowing faintly. The man followed her gaze, but there was nothing unusual outside, just the garden, bathed in morning light. Frustrated but determined, the man decided to try a different approach. He brought her breakfast, hoping that food might help her open up. But the girl only ate in silence, her glowing eyes occasionally flickering toward him. It was as if she was studying him, trying to understand him just as much as he was trying to understand her. As the day went on, strange things began to happen in the mansion. Objects moved on their own, a book falling off a shelf, a chair sliding across the floor. The lights flickered, and the air felt charged, as if a storm was brewing indoors. The staff whispered among themselves, their eyes darting nervously toward the girl. The man tried to ignore it, chalking it up to coincidence or his own imagination. But deep down, he knew something was different about the girl. Something extraordinary. That evening, as he sat in his study, the man noticed something on the girl's wrist. It was a symbol, faint but unmistakable, a series of intricate lines and curves that seemed to pulse with a soft light. He had seen that symbol before, in an old book about extraterrestrial life that he had acquired years ago but never paid much attention to. His heart raced as he pulled the book from the shelf, flipping through the pages until he found it, the same symbol, described as a mark of an ancient alien civilization. According to the book, the symbol was a sign of protection, worn by those who were chosen for a great purpose. The man stared at the girl, his mind reeling. Could it be possible? Was she not just a lost child, but something far beyond his understanding? He needed answers, and he needed them fast. He spent the rest of the night searching his library, looking for anything that might explain the girl's presence. Finally, in a hidden compartment behind a row of books, he found a small, metallic device. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, sleek and glowing faintly, with the same symbol etched into its surface. As he held the device, it began to hum, the sound growing louder as the girl entered the room. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, she spoke, not in words, but in a series of melodic tones that seemed to resonate with the device. The man's hands trembled as he realized the truth. The girl was not from this world. She was an alien, stranded on Earth, and the device was meant to contact her people. But why had it been hidden in his library? And what did it mean for him? Before he could process the implications, the device activated, projecting a holographic image into the air. It was a map, showing a distant planet and a series of coordinates. A voice spoke, deep and resonant, in a language he couldn't understand. But the girl understood. Her glowing eyes filled with tears as she reached out toward the hologram, her small hand trembling. The man felt a surge of emotions, fear, curiosity, and something else he couldn't quite name. He had always been a man of logic, of reason. But now, faced with the impossible, he realized that his life would never be the same. The holographic map floated in the air, its glowing lines shifting and pulsing like a living thing. The man stared at it, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. The girl stood beside him, her small hand still reaching toward the image, her glowing eyes filled with a mixture of hope and sadness. The voice from the device continued to speak, its tone urgent and commanding. Though the man couldn't understand the words, he could feel their weight, the gravity of a message meant for someone far beyond his understanding. The girl, however, seemed to understand perfectly. She nodded slowly, her tiny frame trembling as if the words carried a burden too heavy for her to bear. The man knelt beside her, his voice soft but firm. "Can you tell me what it's saying? What does this mean?" For the first time, the girl looked directly at him. Her glowing eyes seemed to pierce through his soul, and for a moment, he felt as if she could see every thought, every fear, every hope he had ever had. Then she raised her hand, and the hologram shifted, showing images of a distant planet. It was a world unlike anything the man had ever seen. Towering crystal structures rose from the ground, their surfaces reflecting light in 1,000 colors. Rivers of liquid light flowed through the landscape, and the sky was filled with swirling patterns of stars. But there was something wrong, something dark and ominous creeping across the planet's surface, consuming everything in its path. The girl pointed at the darkness, her face filled with fear. She made a series of gestures, trying to explain, but the man could only guess at their meaning. He reached for the book he had found earlier, flipping through the pages until he found a passage that seemed to match what he was seeing. "A cosmic disaster," he read aloud. A phenomenon that consumes entire worlds, leaving nothing but darkness in its wake. The civilization that bore this symbol was said to have faced such a threat, but their fate remains unknown. The man looked at the girl, his heart sinking. Is that what happened to your people? Is that why you're here? The girl nodded, her glowing eyes filling with tears. She pointed at the hologram again, and this time, it showed a group of beings, tall and radiant, with the same glowing eyes as hers. They were fleeing, their faces filled with desperation as they boarded sleek, silver ships. The girl pointed at one of the figures, a woman who looked strikingly like her, and then at herself. Your family? The man asked softly. The girl nodded again, her small hand clutching the hem of his sleeve. She pointed at the hologram, then at the device, and finally at him. The message was clear, she needed his help to contact her people. The man took a deep breath, his mind racing. He had always been a man of logic, of reason. But now, faced with the impossible, he realized that logic alone wouldn't be enough. He had to trust his instincts, his compassion, and the strange connection he felt with this child. All right, he said, his voice steady. We'll figure this out together. But you have to help me understand. Can you show me more? The girl hesitated, then placed her hand on the device. The hologram shifted again, showing a series of coordinates and a countdown. The man recognized the numbers, they were a timeline, counting down to something important. Is this when your people will return? He asked. The girl nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. She pointed at the countdown, then at the darkness on the hologram, and finally at the sky outside the window. The man understood. Her people were coming back for her, but they were being pursued by the same darkness that had destroyed their world. The weight of the situation settled on his shoulders. He wasn't just protecting a lost child anymore. He was part of something much bigger, a battle for survival that spanned across the stars. We'll be ready, he said, his voice filled with determination. I'll do everything I can to keep you safe until they arrive. The girl smiled for the first time, her glowing eyes softening with gratitude. She reached out and touched his hand, and for a moment, he felt a surge of warmth, as if her very presence was filling him with strength. But the moment was short-lived. The device suddenly emitted a loud, piercing sound, and the hologram flickered, showing a new image, a fleet of dark, menacing ships heading toward Earth. The man's heart raced as he realized the truth. The darkness wasn't just coming for the girl's people. It was coming for her. And if it reached her, it would consume everything in its path. The man stared at the hologram, his mind racing as the image of the dark ships burned into his memory. The countdown continued, its numbers ticking away relentlessly. He had no idea how much time they had, but he knew one thing for certain, he couldn't let the girl fall into the hands of those who pursued her. He turned to the girl, his voice calm but urgent. We need to get ready. If those ships are coming here, we have to make sure you're safe. The girl nodded, her glowing eyes filled with trust. She pointed at the device, then at the man, as if to say, you know what to do. The man took a deep breath, his practical mind already working through the possibilities. He was a wealthy man, with resources and connections most people could only dream of. If anyone could prepare for an alien invasion, it was him. He began by securing the mansion. Using his wealth, he ordered state-of-the-art security systems, cameras, motion sensors, and reinforced barriers. He hired a team of engineers to install energy shields around the property, using technology he had invested in years ago but never fully understood until now. The girl watched silently, her glowing eyes following his every move, as if she approved of his efforts. Next, he turned his attention to the device. If it was meant to contact the girl's people, then it might also hold the key to defending against the dark ships. He spent hours studying it, trying to decipher its functions. The girl helped as much as she could, using gestures and holographic images to guide him. Together, they discovered that the device could emit a signal, a beacon that would alert the girl's people to their location. But it could also create a protective barrier, one that might shield them from the dark ship's attacks. The man felt a glimmer of hope. If they could activate the barrier in time, they might stand a chance. But time was running out. The countdown continued, and the man could feel the weight of every passing second. He barely slept, spending his nights poring over the device and his days overseeing the preparations. The staff noticed the change in him, but no one dared to ask questions. They simply followed his orders, their loyalty unwavering. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the man sat with the girl in the study. The hologram floated in the air, showing the dark ships drawing closer to Earth. The girl pointed at the image, her face filled with fear. "I know," the man said softly. "They're coming. But we'll be ready. I promise." The girl looked at him, her glowing eyes searching his face. Then she did something unexpected, she reached out and hugged him. It was a small, hesitant gesture, but it filled the man with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. For the first time in his life, he felt a sense of purpose, a reason to fight for something greater than himself. The moment was interrupted by a loud alarm. The man jumped to his feet, his heart pounding. The security system had detected something, a disturbance in the sky. He rushed to the window, the girl close behind him. Outside, the night sky was lit by strange lights, flashes of red and black, like lightning but far more ominous. The man's stomach churned as he realized what it meant. The dark ships had arrived. "Stay close to me," he said, his voice firm. "We're going to activate the barrier. Whatever happens, don't leave my side." The girl nodded, her small hand clutching his. Together, they ran to the device, the alarms blaring around them. The man's hands trembled as he input the commands, his mind racing through the instructions they had deciphered. The device hummed to life, its glow intensifying as the barrier began to form. But it wasn't fast enough. A loud crash shook the mansion, and the man stumbled, nearly losing his balance. The dark ships were here, and they weren't waiting. The mansion shook violently as another explosion rocked the grounds. The man grabbed the girl's hand, pulling her close as debris rained down around them. The barrier was only partially activated, its shimmering dome flickering weakly above them. They were running out of time. "We need to get to the safe room," the man shouted over the noise. He had prepared for this, a reinforced underground chamber designed to withstand even the most extreme attacks. But getting there would be a challenge. The girl clung to him, her glowing eyes wide with fear. She pointed at the device, her small hand trembling. The man understood. They couldn't leave it behind. The device was their only hope of fully activating the barrier and contacting her people. He grabbed the device, its surface warm and pulsing in his hands. "Stay close to me," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We're going to make it." They moved quickly through the mansion, the alarms blaring and the walls trembling with each new explosion. The man's mind raced as he tried to anticipate the next attack. The dark ships were relentless, their weapons tearing through the mansion's defenses with terrifying precision. As they reached the staircase leading to the safe room, a loud crash echoed from above. The man looked up just in time to see a section of the ceiling collapse. He shoved the girl out of the way, shielding her with his body as debris rained down. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he ignored it, pulling the girl to her feet. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice urgent. The girl shook her head, her glowing eyes filled with concern. She pointed at his shoulder, where blood was seeping through his shirt. The man gritted his teeth. "I'm fine. We need to keep moving." They reached the safe room just as another explosion shook the mansion. The man slammed the door shut, locking it behind them. The room was small but secure, with reinforced walls and a backup power supply. He set the device on the table, his hands shaking as he tried to stabilize the barrier. The girl watched him, her small hands clutching the edge of the table. She pointed at the device, then at herself, as if offering to help. The man hesitated, then nodded. "All right. Show me what to do." The girl placed her hand on the device, her glowing fingers tracing the symbols etched into its surface. The device responded immediately, its hum growing louder as the barrier strengthened. The man watched in awe as the hologram shifted, showing the dark ships circling the mansion like vultures. "It's working," he whispered. "But we need more power." The girl nodded, her face filled with determination. She closed her eyes, her entire body glowing brighter as she channeled her energy into the device. The barrier expanded, its shimmering dome growing stronger with each passing second. But the dark ships weren't giving up. They launched a coordinated attack, their weapons slamming into the barrier with terrifying force. The safe room shook, and the man stumbled, catching himself on the table. He could feel the strain on the barrier, the device struggling to hold against the onslaught. "We can't hold them off forever," he said, his voice tense. "We need to contact your people. Now." The girl nodded, her glowing eyes filled with urgency. She pointed at the hologram, her small hands moving quickly as she input a series of commands. The device responded, its hum rising to a deafening pitch as it sent out a signal, a beacon of hope in the midst of chaos. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the hologram shifted, showing a fleet of silver ships approaching Earth. The man's heart leaped. "Is that them? Are they coming?" The girl smiled for the first time since the attack began, her glowing eyes filled with relief. She nodded, pointing at the hologram as the silver ships moved closer. But their relief was short-lived. The dark ships had detected the signal, and they weren't about to let their prey escape. They launched a final, devastating attack, their weapons slamming into the barrier with enough force to shatter it. The safe room shook violently, and the man grabbed the girl, shielding her with his body as the walls began to crack. The device flickered, its glow fading as the barrier collapsed. The man's heart sank. They were out of time. The safe room was crumbling around them. Dust filled the air, and the sound of cracking walls echoed like thunder. The man held the girl tightly, his mind racing as he tried to think of a way out. The barrier was gone, and the dark ships were closing in. They had only moments before the hostile aliens breached the mansion. The girl looked up at him, her glowing eyes filled with fear but also determination. She pointed at the device, which was flickering weakly on the table. The man understood. Even if the barrier was down, the device was still their only hope. "We need to get out of here," he said, his voice firm despite the chaos. "Can you carry the device?" The girl nodded, her small hands clutching the device to her chest. The man grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the door. The safe room wouldn't hold much longer, and they needed to find a way to escape before it was too late. They burst into the hallway, the mansion in ruins around them. The walls were cracked, the floors littered with debris, and the air was thick with smoke. The man led the girl through the wreckage, his heart pounding as he searched for a way out. But the dark ships weren't done yet. A loud crash echoed from above, and the man looked up just in time to see a section of the ceiling collapse. He shoved the girl out of the way, taking the full force of the debris on his back. Pain shot through his body, but he gritted his teeth and pushed through it. "Keep moving," he shouted, his voice strained. "We're almost there." The girl hesitated, her glowing eyes filled with concern. She reached out to him, but he shook his head. "I'm fine. We have to keep going." They reached the mansion's underground garage, where the man kept his most secure vehicles. He ushered the girl into a heavily armored car, its reinforced walls designed to withstand even the most extreme conditions. The device hummed softly in the girl's hands, its glow flickering like a dying ember. The man climbed into the driver's seat, his hands trembling as he started the engine. The car roared to life, its headlights cutting through the smoke and dust. He glanced at the girl, her small frame huddled in the passenger seat, and felt a surge of determination. He couldn't let her down. Not now. As they sped out of the garage, the dark ships descended, their weapons firing relentlessly. The car shook with each impact, but its reinforced walls held strong. The man drove with precision, weaving through the wreckage and debris as he tried to put as much distance between them and the mansion as possible. But the dark ships were fast, and they weren't about to let their prey escape. One of the ships swooped down, its weapons locking onto the car. The man's heart raced as he saw the targeting lasers. They were out of options. "Hold on," he shouted, swerving the car sharply. The weapons fired, missing them by inches. The girl clutched the device tightly, her glowing eyes wide with fear. The man's mind raced. They couldn't keep running forever. They needed a plan, something to turn the tide. He glanced at the girl, her small hands still clutching the device. "Can you use that thing to fight back?" he asked. "To stop them?" The girl hesitated, then nodded. She placed her hand on the device, her glowing fingers tracing the symbols. The device responded, its hum growing louder as it began to emit a powerful energy field. The man felt a surge of hope. Maybe they had a chance after all. But the girl's powers were fading. Her glow dimmed, and her small frame trembled with exhaustion. The man realized the truth: she was using her own energy to power the device, and it was taking everything she had. "You can't keep doing this," he said, his voice filled with concern. "You'll hurt yourself." The girl looked at him, her glowing eyes filled with determination. She pointed at the dark ships, then at the device, as if to say, "This is the only way." The man's heart ached. He couldn't let her sacrifice herself. Not like this. He reached out and placed his hand on hers, his voice soft but firm. "You're not alone in this. We're in it together, remember?" The girl's eyes softened, and for a moment, the fear and exhaustion seemed to fade. She nodded, her small hand tightening around his. Together, they focused on the device, their combined energy strengthening its power. The device responded, its glow intensifying as it unleashed a burst of energy. The dark ships were caught off guard, their weapons faltering as the energy wave hit them. One of the ships spiraled out of control, crashing into the ground with a deafening explosion. The man felt a surge of hope. They were turning the tide. But the girl's strength was fading fast. Her glow dimmed, and her small frame slumped against the seat. The man's heart sank. They couldn't keep this up much longer. The car screeched to a halt as the man pulled into a secluded clearing, far from the ruins of the mansion. The girl was barely conscious, her glowing eyes flickering weakly as she clung to the device. The man's heart ached as he looked at her. She had given everything to protect them, and now she was paying the price. "Stay with me," he said, his voice trembling. "Your people are coming. Just hold on a little longer." The girl nodded faintly, her small hand tightening around his. The device in her lap hummed softly, its glow dim but steady. The man glanced at the sky, his stomach churning with anxiety. The dark ships were still out there, circling like predators. They didn't have much time. Suddenly, the device emitted a loud, piercing sound. The man flinched, his eyes darting to the hologram that flickered to life above it. The image showed a fleet of silver ships approaching Earth, their sleek designs a stark contrast to the dark, menacing vessels that pursued them. "Is that them?" the man asked, his voice filled with hope. The girl nodded weakly, her glowing eyes lighting up for a moment. She pointed at the hologram, her small hand trembling. The man understood. Her people were here. They had come for her. But the dark ships weren't about to let them go. A loud roar echoed through the sky as the hostile aliens descended, their weapons locking onto the silver ships. The man's heart raced as he realized the danger. The girl's people were walking into a trap. "We have to warn them," he said, his voice urgent. "Can the device send a message?" The girl nodded, her hands moving weakly as she input a series of commands. The device responded, its hum growing louder as it sent out a signal. The man held his breath, praying it would be enough. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the silver ships shifted their formation, moving with precision and speed. They launched a counterattack, their weapons striking the dark ships with devastating accuracy. The man watched in awe as the tide began to turn. One of the silver ships broke away from the fleet, descending toward the clearing where the man and the girl waited. The man's heart pounded as the ship landed, its sleek surface gleaming in the sunlight. The hatch opened, and a group of beings stepped out, tall and radiant, with the same glowing eyes as the girl. The girl's face lit up with joy as she recognized them. She tried to stand, but her strength gave out, and she slumped against the man. He held her tightly, his heart swelling with a mix of relief and sadness. One of the beings stepped forward, their voice melodic and soothing. "You have protected her," they said, their words translated by the device. "We are in your debt." The man shook his head, his voice choked with emotion. "I just did what I thought was right. She's like family to me." The being nodded, their glowing eyes filled with gratitude. They reached out, their hand hovering over the girl. The silver ship's engines hummed softly as the man stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the dark ship circle above. The girl's people had offered him a chance to escape, to leave Earth behind and start a new life on their world. But as he looked at the girl, her glowing eyes filled with trust and hope, he knew he couldn't leave. "Not yet. I have to stay," he said, his voice firm. "If those ships aren't stopped, they'll destroy everything. I can't let that happen." The girl's eyes widened, and she shook her head, her small hands clutching his arm. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You can't stay. It's too dangerous." The man knelt beside her, his heart aching at the fear in her eyes. "I'll be all right," he said softly. "I've faced danger before. But you need to go with your people. They'll keep you safe." The girl's people watched silently, their glowing eyes filled with understanding. One of them stepped forward, their voice calm but urgent. "The darkness is relentless. If you stay, you may not survive." The man nodded, his resolve unwavering. "I know. But if I can buy you some time, if I can give you a chance to escape, then it's worth it." The girl's tears glowed faintly as they rolled down her cheeks. She threw her arms around the man, her small frame trembling. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." The man held her tightly, his heart swelling with emotion. He had never expected to feel this way, to care so deeply for someone he had only just met. But the girl had changed him, had shown him a side of himself he didn't know existed. "Take care of her," he said to the girl's people, his voice choked with emotion. She's special." They nodded, their glowing eyes filled with gratitude. "We will protect her with our lives," they said. "And we will never forget your sacrifice." The man watched as the girl was led onto the silver ship, her glowing eyes never leaving his. He gave her a small smile, trying to reassure her even as his heart ached. The hatch closed, and the ship's engines roared to life, lifting it into the sky. As the ship disappeared into the clouds, the man turned his attention to the dark ships. They were closing in, their weapons charging for another attack. He knew he didn't have much time. He ran back to the car, where the device still hummed softly. The girl's people had shown him how to use it to create a diversion, to draw the dark ships away from the fleeing silver fleet. It was a risky plan, but it was the only chance they had. The man input the commands, his hands steady despite the chaos around him. The device responded, its glow intensifying as it emitted a powerful signal. The dark ships immediately changed course, their weapons locking onto the source of the signal. The man took a deep breath, his heart pounding as he prepared for the final stand. He knew he couldn't win, but he didn't need to. He just needed to buy enough time for the girl and her people to escape. The dark ships descended, their weapons firing relentlessly. The man dodged and weaved, using the car's reinforced armor to shield himself. The device's barrier flickered weakly, barely holding against the onslaught. But the man didn't give up. He fought with everything he had, his mind racing as he tried to outmaneuver the dark ships. He thought of the girl, of her glowing eyes and her quiet strength, and it gave him the courage to keep going. As the final attack came, the man stood his ground, the device in his hands glowing brightly. He looked up at the dark ships, his voice steady despite the fear in his heart. "You won't win," he said. "Not today." The device emitted a blinding burst of light, its energy wave slamming into the dark ships with devastating force. The man felt the impact, the force of it knocking him off his feet. He hit the ground hard, his vision blurring as the world around him faded to black. The man's world was dark and silent. He couldn't feel his body, couldn't hear the sounds of battle or the hum of the device. For a moment, he thought he was dead. But then, slowly, the darkness began to fade, replaced by a soft, glowing light. He opened his eyes, his vision blurry at first. The first thing he saw was a ceiling, sleek and metallic, unlike anything he had ever seen on Earth. He blinked, trying to make sense of his surroundings. He was lying on a bed, its surface smooth and warm to the touch. The air smelled faintly of something sweet and unfamiliar. "Where am I?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. A familiar face appeared above him, her glowing eyes filled with relief. It was the girl. She smiled, her small hand reaching out to touch his. "You're safe," she said, her voice soft but clear. "You're with us." The man's heart swelled with emotion. He had thought he would never see her again. How did I get here?" he asked. The girl's people stepped forward, their tall, radiant forms filling the room. One of them spoke, their voice melodic and soothing. "You were gravely injured, but we were able to save you. Your bravery gave us the time we needed to escape. We owe you our lives." The man shook his head, his voice filled with humility. "I just did what I thought was right. I couldn't let them hurt her." The girl's grip on his hand tightened, her glowing eyes filled with gratitude. "You saved me," she said. "And now you're here, with us." The man looked around, taking in the room's advanced technology and the peaceful atmosphere. He realized he was on the girl's home planet, a world far beyond anything he had ever imagined. "What happens now?" he asked. The girl's people smiled, their glowing eyes filled with warmth. "You are welcome to stay here, as long as you wish. You are one of us now." The man felt a surge of emotions, relief, gratitude, and a sense of belonging he had never known. He looked at the girl, her small face filled with hope. "What do you think?" he asked. "Should I stay?" The girl nodded, her smile lighting up the room. "Yes," she said. "Stay with me." The man's heart felt full. He had spent his entire life chasing wealth and success, but now he realized that true wealth was the love and connections he had found with the girl and her people. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "I'll stay." As the days passed, the man adapted to his new life. He learned about the girl's world, its advanced technology, and its peaceful way of life. He formed bonds with her people, who treated him as one of their own. But his strongest bond was with the girl. She became like a daughter to him, and he cherished every moment they spent together. One day, as they stood on a hill overlooking the Crystal City, the girl turned to him, her glowing eyes filled with curiosity. "Do you miss Earth?" she asked. The man thought for a moment, then shook his head. Earth was my home, but it was never my family. You're my family now. The girl smiled, her small hand slipping into his. You're my family too. The man felt a sense of peace he had never known. He had found a new beginning, a new purpose. And as he looked out at the glowing landscape, he realized that the greatest adventure of his life was just beginning. Life lesson. The story ends with a powerful message: true wealth is not measured by money or success, but by the love and connections we make. Compassion, courage, and selflessness can change lives and create bonds that transcend worlds.